The next stage, holiness. Holiness. What matters is that, we start changing the liturgy. They start changing what we're doing at the liturgy. We can't be over too much focus on devotions. There has to be a balance, the perpetual help devotion and the rosary crusades, the processions and all that. We diminished the processions we used to do. We diminished the holy practices that we used to do. And we do them much less and less, diminishing the number of times for confession. We still have confession, but we have less and less confessions. We're diminishing the number of masses. We used to say 2 masses, but now we realize that you can fit everybody. Like St. Isidore's, for instance, it's a big church. We used to have 2 masses every Sunday. But they said, you know what, it's a big church. We can fit everybody in 1 mass, so why don't we just reduce to 1 mass? Because the priest is tired. Realize when you reduce to 1 mass, even if the church is big, you're killing the parish life. You are diminishing the number of people that can make it to mass. You're increasing the number of people that don't make it to mass, because some people can't go to the 10 o'clock mass all the time, so they'll go to the 8 o'clock or the 7:30 mass. And then you're diminishing the growth of your parish. Even it doesn't matter that the building is bigger. So the holiness begins to go down. We don't need all these supernatural things that we used to have. We still have them, less and less and less. And the people are beginning to notice it. Father, can you go and anoint somebody? No. Is he a parishioner? Is he a parishioner? I had to fly from Brazil back to New York and anoint a priest who was dying. The priest is better now. He's still alive, but now he's dying again. He's 84 or 85 years old. Because the local society priests, who were, admittedly, it was a 3-hour drive from them, but for me coming from Brazil, it was a longer trip. And, so they would not go and anoint him because, he's 84 years old. He was ordained when he was 72, and, maybe it wasn't a valid ordination. He was ordained by St. Epicantus. Maybe it was valid. Well, does that mean he cannot be absolved of his sins? Does that mean he's not able to be anointed? Does that mean he is incapable of salvation? Look at the confusion in our times. He's a good priest. Does he have to be refused the sacraments? Do you have to get special permission? He said, I got to get special permission. Other cases of priests refusing to go to the faithful. He's not a parishioner. One time in California, a person was dying, which was very bad of him because he was dying on vacation. He should have scheduled his death better. But the fact is, he was a traditional Catholic from the beginning, from 1970. But he was in the Cincinnati, Ohio, Kentucky area, not too far from my home. He was visiting his daughter in California and foolishly decided to almost die when he was in California. He should have thought ahead. He shouldn't have done that. But unfortunately, he didn't plan ahead. So he got sick and almost died in California. So they called the priest, an SSPX priest in California, can you please anoint this? He's not a parishioner. Finally, my brother calls and said, look, Father, my mommy calls and said, look, he's been a Society of St. Pius X parishioner for 40 years. But he doesn't go to California every week for Mass because it's a really long trip. He lives in Kentucky. It's closer for him to go to the Mass that's been there for the last 30 years than it is to travel 2,000 miles to be one of your parishioners. But he's dying right now. And he's a Catholic. And not only is he a Catholic, he's a traditional Catholic. My brother was going to fly from Kentucky. He was on vacation at the time. He was going to fly 3,000 miles to anoint the man. And finally, the priest agreed to go and anoint him. But it was a battle. These are the diminishings of the holiness. In the 1980s, there were many Catholics came to the Latin Mass simply because they called every church at 2 in the morning because Grandma was dying. And then they called, St. Bimbob's church, the local SSPX church, and they called it, and the priest answered the phone at 2 in the morning and said, Father, my grandma is dying, can you anoint him at the St. Mary and Elizabeth Hospital? Boom, he goes and anoints. And they come in, they see the priest in the cassock. What's he doing in the cassock? I've never seen a priest like that before. And then he starts saying some prayers in Latin, and he sprinkles holy water, and he does the anointing, and they say, we want to go to your church. So many cases like that. And now it still happens, but less and less and less and less. There are still priests that go out and do these things. But the increase of the priests that won't is legion. They won't say the Mass. They won't hear confessions after Mass. I used to hear confessions after Mass every single Sunday in Fort Collins. Now they say they don't want to hear confessions after Mass because the priest is tired. There's so many things. There are times, of course, when you can't do that. But it's just that not all the time. The diminishing of the holiness is there. And they see the priests. Many faithful are telling me, we know that there's a house for the priests, a party. Everybody knows a priest needs a break. But do they need party houses? Do they need their special R&R houses? Do they need their special, too much time in these kinds of things? Massive hunting trips and massive motorcycle trips and massive, so that these things happen from time to time. People understand. We know the priests are human. They need a break too. But do they need a break every day? Do they need a break every week? Do they need a break all the time? Are they always tired? One young lady told me, says, Father, I see the older priests. He says Mass at 6 in the morning, but the young priest won't because he's tired. But the old priest of the society, he's not tired. The young priest is tired. Why is that? Hearing these things all over the world. Holiness diminishing. Now it comes down to the faith. The last thing to go is the faith. And the faith went. Lest there be any confusion, the faith went. And that's the part that matters. Because holiness, Catholicity, and apostolicity, there's always been weak priests in the church. There's always been a lack of apostolicity, a lack of Catholicity, a lack of holiness, all throughout the history of the church. Judas was a scandal of the priesthood. And there's always been scandals of the priesthood. Not only gravely scandalous priests, but just priests that are weak. Always, 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 you will find a certain weakness in the church of apostolicity, a certain weakness in Catholicity, a certain weakness in holiness. That's human nature. And in fact, in my own case, seeing these kind of things, I saw all these things we talked about over the last 20 years, especially the last 10 years, but I always thought it was just normal human weakness. But only recently, in the course of the last year, has it become clear that there's an organization behind this, that there's a plan behind it. And that weakness only explains part of the problem. It does explain part of it, but not all of it. Just speaking to a priest yesterday, he said he hasn't read the doctrinal preamble. How could you be a priest of the Society of St. Pius X, and you know that there's a liberal document that's come out from your superior, and you don't read it, you don't study it, at least to justify it against the people that are attacking it, but yet the priests are not interested. They're not worried about it. Or they are worried and they don't want to see. I think many priests today in the society are like the man who thinks he has cancer. When you have cancer, you know that if you go to the doctor when you're in stage 1, they can remove the cancer like that. No problem. But if you go to the doctor when you're in stage 4, he just says, fill out your will, you're going to be dead in a month. So the longer that you wait, the worse it is. We all know that. But there's still many hundreds of thousands of men, lakhs and lakhs of men, who have cancer, or they think they have cancer, but they refuse to go to the doctor, because then they're going to find out they have cancer. And if they don't find out they have cancer, they feel better. If they find out they have cancer, they feel terrible. And that's what's happening in society today. There are many priests who don't want to go to the doctor. We're men of doctrine. What's the doctor? The doctrine. Read the doctrine. We find in 2012 a public profession of another faith than the one that we received in 1970 when Archbishop Lefebvre started the society, the same faith we received 2,000 years ago when the church was founded. And the sacrifice, the sacraments, all of these things, we're truly under the Holy Father, all these things were clear in the society before, now they're confused. Now we have the doctrinal preamble. Just very quickly. The loss of the unity in the Society of St. Pius X. Number 7. The doctrinal preamble was written April the 15th, 2012, was sent by Bishop Flay to Rome as a doctrinal statement of what we believe, what we declare, what we accept about Vatican II and the council. It just happens to be different than what we believe and what we declare over the last 40 years. Therefore, we've got a serious problem. We go straight to number 7, the easiest one to start with. And that is, we declare that we recognize the validity of the sacrifice of the Mass and the sacraments celebrated with the intention to do what the Church does according to the rites indicated in the typical editions of the Roman Missal and the sacramentary rituals legitimately promulgated by Popes Paul VI and John Paul II. So this is a statement that the new Mass, according to Bishop Fellay, is valid, which we have accepted before, and legitimately promulgated, and that's the key. Legitimately promulgated means it's a legitimate Mass. Like the example we used last Sunday, I've used many times. It's like someone saying, you get an accident and Mr. Jones is killed, driven over by your car. So you make a statement to the police. One statement is, I got in my car, I drove down the road, and I drove over Mr. Jones, who was sleeping in the middle of the road, and killed him. Statement B, I got in my car, I drove down the road, and I intentionally killed Mr. Jones. What's the difference? One word, intentionally. What's the big deal? Statement 1, insurance rates go up. Statement 2, you get the electric chair. That's the difference. The first one is called a car accident, causing your insurance rates to go up. The second one is called murder, which means you are electrocuted or hung by the neck until dead. There's a big difference between killed Mr. Jones in your car and intentionally killed Mr. Jones in your car. So likewise, there is an essential difference between saying the new Mass is valid, which was promulgated by Pope Paul VI, and saying the new Mass is valid and legitimately promulgated by Pope Paul VI. This means that the new Mass is good. If the new Mass is good, then we have no right to tell people not to go to it. And yet we know, we've always said that. I talked to a priest yesterday. I said, do you accept the new direction of society? He says, I think it's the same as it always was. Well, I said, well, the new society says in the doctrinal preamble that the new Mass is not only valid, but legitimate. Do you accept, Father, that the new Mass is valid and legitimate? And he says, I accept it's valid, but I do not accept that it's legitimate. It is an illegitimate Mass. Correct. Very good. Then you are against the new position of the Society of St. Pius X. And he said, I don't know, I haven't read it yet. I haven't read it yet. Now, you have to read it. I said, well, it's come out in the March Corunum. They said, well, you know, that may be true, I understood that, but it's not, I haven't received it yet, so I haven't read it yet. But it is available on the internet, it's very clearly there. And Father Touvenot admits that it's a correct document. We're dealing with doctrine. It used to be in the past, if there was a doctrinal attack against a society, attacking our faith and our stance of faith, we would answer it. And we would answer it with clarity. The new society is muddled in its faith. The new society has collapsed in its faith. And know this, it can't collapse in the faith unless it first loses some holiness, and some Catholicity, and some apostolicity. And if we look down the last 20 years, we will see the steps, which are the steps of corruption. But then there's another side to this whole battle. And that is, it's not just corruption. There is an organized group that has tried to change the official stance of the Society of St. Pius X so that it can be brought in under the modernist Rome in the name of ecumenism. A group that organized itself with that purpose is called GREC, G-R-E-C. Began in 1997 in Paris. They gathered together some theologians and experts from the Roman side, modernists, and Father Laurence, and some other priests, Father Cellier, Society of St. Pius X priest, with the approval of Bishop Fellay. And those three names are still the key three names in this battle. And they gathered together to say, we need to change the whole battlefield. What can we do to reunite Rome and the Society of St. Pius X? That is, modernist Rome and the Society of St. Pius X. Well, they're at odds with each other. We need to do two things. One, we need to make some alterations on the Roman side. Two, we need to make some alterations on the SSPX side. This is the plan, organization, not just corruption. And therefore, on the Roman side, what are we going to do? We're going to get Rome to free up the Latin Mass better than it did with the 84 and 88 indults. Number two, we're going to get Rome to have a show of goodwill by lifting the excommunications of 1988. Then, on the society side, we're just going to get them to diminish their attacks against the Council and Vatican II and the new Mass. They can still attack it, of course, but let's get them to tone it down. Let's get them to diminish it. Then we can have doctrinal talks. And from these doctrinal talks, we will then have a union. That was the plan in 97. It came out in 2001. There was a meeting. There was a 2000 pilgrimage. The 2000 pilgrimage must have been prepared by Greg. In 2000 pilgrimage, the society has 5,000 people walking in Rome, and they see the beauty of the 7 cathedrals, the 7 basilicas, and with the approval of the Pope, they walk in Rome. They meet with Cardinal Hoyos. The 3 bishops have dinner with the Cardinal Hoyos, and the poison begins to set in. And then we have new discussions. Guess what? The society has decided that there must be 4 steps. Guess what they are? First of all, there must be a freeing of the Latin Mass. There must be a lifting of the excommunications. And then only if they fulfill these 2 conditions that we've already talked about 6 years ago in secret, then we will have doctrinal talks, which we discussed with Cardinal Hoyos in 2002. But now it's a decision of the General Chapter in 2006. And then we can talk about a practical agreement. But of course, no practical agreement until doctrinal agreement. Which is already a slide. Because it used to be, we will not be with the modernist Romans until the light of faith shines over Rome again. Then we'll be with the Romans. When the light of faith shines over the Romans again. And there's no need for us to have a doctrinal agreement. There's a need for Rome to convert. Notice the essential difference between Rome's conversion and doctrinal agreement. Doctrinal agreement means we have the same ideology. It does not mean that Rome converted. Rome converts means Rome returns to the traditional Catholic teaching. We have doctrinal agreement might mean we change to the new teaching. Or we change halfway to the new teaching, and they change halfway to the old teaching, and we have an agreement. Agreement does not mean conversion. It's already a huge slide from saying from Rome's conversion to doctrinal agreement. That was 2006. And so the slide is continuous, organized. It's not totally disorganized. Then during the course of these years, what happens? Priests who are too independent, priests that are too anti-liberal, priests that are acting like the old SSPX priests used to act, they've got to be removed. Why do they have to be removed? In the old days, for instance, if I wanted to build a school, I just went and built a school. And then when the superior came, he said, "Father, we got a new school." "Oh, really? Okay, then we can throw some holy water on it." And then if an interviewer came and they wanted to get to talk, "I want to hear about the history of the Society of St. Pius X," and they talked to the 23-year-old priest who just got ordained last week, "Sure, I'll give you a talk on the Society of St. Pius X. It started by Archbishop Lefebvre, whatever his name is, and we are against the bad guys." And so they would give a talk, and there's no need to ask permission. There was none of that. When I was transferred, when I built the church, I just called Kansas City and I said, "I want to build a $1 million church." And he said, "Okay, Father Scott." And so then Father Scott calls Menzingen. "It's a $1 million church. Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, about $1 million." So we sent up little drawings. There's $1.2 million to build the church. "No problem. Go ahead and build the church." That was it. Now there's so much red tape you have to go through that you can't do anything. Then they show up and bless it. Bishop shows up and does the cornerstone blessing. Bishop shows up and does a blessing. Bishop shows up and does a consecration. No problem. You want to build a school? You just call up the boss. "I want to build a school." "Okay." And then we build a school. And so we were just doing things, and we had to get permission, but just very simple, basic verbal permission, and that was sufficient. If you spend lots and lots of money, you got to get permission from headquarters, and that was it. It was very simple. So you could operate openly, and you already knew when you called and asked permission, you already knew that you had the permission. It was just kind of like going through a formality. Now priests can't operate like that anymore. You got to get rid of those priests. Why is it important to get rid of those priests? Because those priests are potentially dangerous. If this priest is a prior, and we change to modernist Rome, this priest may not go along with it. And when you try to throw him out of his priory, you might have a hard time. And he might try to save that church for Catholic tradition. Therefore, remove those priests in each country. And we find priests being removed throughout the countries. This has been going on for at least the last 15 years. One at a time, here and there. You replace them with young priests. Young priests, and we've always had young priests in society, but young priests who don't have any gumption, who have no fire, who don't have any desires except for, let's just do my job, do whatever the boss tells me to do, and keep things going, but I don't want any more headaches. Father, you want to say an extra Mass? No, I don't want to say an extra Mass. Father, can you come over here and say Mass with these 10 people in this other chapel? Absolutely not. You're crazy. I've already got 200 people in my chapel. They forget that every one of our chapels started with 7 people. Like St. Isidore's, for instance, in Denver, Colorado. In 1983, I was a pastor there for 11 years. In 1983, there was 7 faithful in the garage of Mr. James Nason. That was the parish. Now they've got a big school, they got a big church, they've got a whole thing, they got a big beautiful complex, they got daily Mass, they got a priory, they got 3 priests. It didn't start off like that. And the young priests forget about that. They don't know that. They don't realize that this is how you spread the faith. You go and say Mass for 5 people. Next thing you know, it becomes 15. Next thing you know, it becomes 150. Next thing you know, one of them wants to be a priest. Next thing you know, he gets ordained. Next thing you know, you've got a priory there. All that is diminishing. You put the new guys in, and so they change it. The faith, then when you change the doctrine, they are also taught new things in the seminary. There's a new doctrine in the seminary. The new doctrine is obey. Confidence in the superiors. The priest is a spiritual man. He is not a man of doctrine, he is a man of spirit. And he must maintain his own personal spirituality. And the most important virtue that God gave is obedience. 2 sides of obedience. You as a good priest must obey your superior. And as a good priest, you must make sure that every single animal you meet is obedient to you. A priest is an obedience machine. He is obedient to those above him, and he smashes those below him. And that's the new attitude. It is a taught attitude. Noblesse oblige. I am noble, it obliges you to obey the noble. That's what happens. So there is a change of doctrine. There is a collapse in the society. And it's every level. That's why Father Jahir says, you can't fix the corruption is like white ants. It's like termites. It's all throughout the wood. It's everywhere inside. You can't just change the boss. Say, wait for Bishop Flay to get reelected. Or someone to take his place. That's not going to fix anything. Because the error is in the apostolicity, it's in the Catholicity, it's in the holiness, it's in the oneness. Can we now say of a society of priests that every society of priests has the same doctrine? Absolutely not. Father Pfeiffer tells me that there's 150 priests in France. 50 of them are staunch liberals. 50 of them are staunch anti-liberals. And 50 could go either way. Whichever side wins. We have priests in France who do marriages with the Novus Ordo priest coming over and doing the marriage. And our priest says the Mass, as if to indicate that our marriages are invalid. It's an ecumenical service, basically. They're not punished, they're not smashed. Father Giselle, that's how his niece got married. Father Giselle's sister, Father Giselle is with me, his sister's daughter was married with the SSPX priest saying the Mass, who was not her uncle, Father Giselle, and the Novosoro indult priest doing the exchange of vows. Father Olonier, in fact, it was. Doing the exchange of vows. Mixing the indultarians and the society. This kind of thing should be formally punished in the past. So these corruptions are happening everywhere. And to say that just by waiting and doing a new election, that's not going to fix anything. There are many priests in the Society of St. Pius X who refuse to anoint someone who is not a parishioner. There are priests in the society who say absolutely not should girls be wearing dresses all the time. There are priests in the Society of St. Pius X who are promoting NFP, within bounds, of course. There are priests in the Society of St. Pius X who say you can go to the indult Mass. What's the problem? There are priests in the Society of St. Pius X who say, why are we saying Mass in that town when there's an indult Mass in that town? And you can say, oh, those are hypothetical, those are isolated cases. Well, when you have 500 isolated cases out of 550 possible cases, that's a lot of isolated cases. That's like one of my Mexican parishioners used to say, remember, you're unique, just like everybody else. Yeah, every case is an isolated case. But when you have 5,000 isolated cases, you've got a pattern. And you can't just call them, quote-unquote, isolated cases. There are so many of these cases, and they increase every day. And furthermore, not only do they increase, whenever there's a complaint about these cases, nothing's done. Father Tope, for instance, refuses Holy Communion this week. Why wasn't he smashed the next day? The next day, if he had done something so wicked. He was not smashed the next day. He still says he's going to refuse communion to those 6 whom he calls the leaders of putting Father Pfeiffer to come and say Mass there. The wicked act of a disobedient priest saying Mass in a disobedient place where another disobedient priest is saying a disobedient Mass also. It's insanity. Doesn't he realize that he's disobedient to the local bishop? Doesn't he realize that every Mass he says every day is disobedient? He's worse than me because he's pertinacious in the disobedience. He says a disobedient Mass every single day in the same place. I'm traveling. Just saying a couple disobedient Masses in this diocese. This is craziness. And so that so we have a different, the oneness of is damaged and destroyed. There are priests in the society who believe that we have to accept Vatican II in the Latin tradition. There are priests in the society who believe, just as we always used to believe, Vatican II is extremely bad and must be completely thrown out in toto. There are priests in the society who believe it's half and half, and so on. All kinds of variety of teaching in the priests of society. The unity of faith isn't there anymore. There are priests in society, for instance, as regards the sacrifice, who don't say the prayers after low Mass. Much of the time. Other priests say it every day. It's one of the scandals in Post Falls. Why is it that they're skipping the prayers after low Mass? No, it's not part of the Mass, right? It's just a requirement of Pope Leo XIII. And so there are all kinds of changes. Remember this, the liturgy, Oremus pro perfides Judaeis. You know, almost every priest, at least in the English-speaking world, always says Oremus pro perfides Judaeis, for the prayer for the Jews, to pray for the perfidious Jews. And now, you know, they've changed that. The Confiteor, some maybe are changing the Confiteor also, no longer some, I think most are still doing the Confiteor, but we're finding changes. Inconsistencies. One priest is a very strong anti-liberal, another priest is pro-liberal, another priest is in between. We have no longer unity in the society. And one of the sure signs is all the talk of unity. We're united. We are one. We are so together. It's just like when you go to a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant and it says good food, don't eat there, because that means they serve garbage. When you go to a restaurant that serves very good food, it says filet mignon, it says the names of the various dishes that are all wonderful. But when it's a bad restaurant, it always says good food. And what does a used car salesman tell you? Trust me. You can trust me. When you hear that, you're in trouble. And what are we talking about now in the new society? You can trust us. Archbishop Lefebvre never said that. And we are united. Never mind the fact that we've kicked out one of the 4 bishops, that the 3 bishops are fighting against the 1 bishop, and we're trying to get them to shift sides, so now it's 2 against 2, and then they finally got Bishop Tissier half on one side, and then Bishop Williamson is thrown out. Well, obviously we're united. And then the priests, 30 of us are thrown out, but of course we're united, and the faithful are united. They're so united in Brisbane that some of them can't go to communion anymore. And we speak of unity, unity, unity. It's blown apart. How did this unity get destroyed? First, there was a destruction of apostolicity. Then there was a destruction of Catholicity. Then there was a destruction of holiness. And then there was a loss of unity. And just by changing bosses and changing paint and putting a new paint job on the society, it won't fix it. There's only 2 ways to fix it, says Father Jahir, 76-year-old priest in Brazil. All the priests that are faithful have to get together and throw out all of the bad superiors. Not some of them. Number 2, if they cannot throw them out, then they have to leave and start all over. Exactly like the Franciscans did, like St. Teresa. He said, you must do what St. Teresa did. St. Teresa of Avila. St. Teresa of Avila, the Carmelites have been around for over 1,000 years. She couldn't fix the Carmelites. They were too corrupt. So she had to form another branch of Carmelites following the traditional rule that were completely independent from the corrupted Carmelites. This is the only practical answer to the present crisis of society. And somebody's going to have to wake up and see it. This is the elephant in the living room. What are some priests saying? There's many good priests in society. Of course there's many good priests in society. There's many good faithful. Of course there's many good faithful. But don't forget that there's many good priests in the fraternity of St. Peter. There's many good priests in the diocese. There's many good priests in Rome. There's good faithful everywhere in the world. Many of them, when they die, they're going to go straight to heaven. Whereas many of our people, when they die, they're going to go straight to hell. We are not about good people and bad people, nice people and mean people. We are about the doctrine of the faith. We are about the Catholic Church. And when we see that this organization, called the Society of St. Pius X, is so inundated in all of the 4 elements that make it Catholic, so corrupted in all the 4 elements that make it Catholic, then we have to face that fact. The only way to clean it up is to stand up and say, there's dirt on the wall. Like my brother Bill and his little kids. He says, it's the girls. Clean up the floor. And there's toys on the floor. And there's garbage on the floor. And they said, it's fine, I can't see anything. He goes, pick that toy up. And they picked it up. It's all clean now. What's dirty? He goes, that's dirty. Well, okay. Is it done now? No, that. No, that. So he has to point out every single toy and every single dust bunny so that they clean it up because the little girl can't see it. There's no way of cleaning up the SSPX unless an SSPX priest and an SSPX bishop, preferably, stands up and says, no, this is a problem, face it. That's a problem, face it. We have priests that are saying indult mass is okay, deal with them. We have priests that are doing mixed marriages with indultarians. Smash them, punish them, tell them they can't do that anymore. We got priests that are refusing Holy Communion. We got priests that say the hybrid mass may be tolerable, such as Father Rostam, the superior of the Society of St. Pius X in the United States. He was asked about will you consider accepting the hybrid mass? And he said, well, it's a question of, I don't know, because we don't know what's going to be said, what the hybrid mass is going to be like. It's basically a bunch of rumors. And the important thing is that we get the right to keep the 62 liturgy. Which means the answer is yes, we're willing to consider accepting the hybrid mass. Archbishop Lefebvre says, we refuse all the reforms. Is the hybrid mass a fruit of Vatican II? Yes. Okay. No. Next question. But it's very nice. Okay? No. We reject the fruits of Vatican II. Very clear, very precise, our teaching. No more in the Society of St. Pius X. So just by changing out a bishop, changing out a local superior here and there, won't fix the problem. It's trickled all the way to the bottom. Why isn't there a great uproar? If the society was healthy, there will be a great uproar. The fact that there has not been a great uproar means the society is in stage 4 and stage 5 of cancer. Therefore, we have to take action now and resist now. So these 4 marks have been obliterated, they have been damaged, they have been wounded gravely in all the areas and not just one. And it's not a matter of changing out a boss and everything is fixed. Absolutely not. Stand up boldly and publicly and point out the errors. Stand up boldly and publicly and condemn the errors. Stand up boldly and publicly and profess the same truth that we were commanded and taught to profess in our seminaries, the traditional seminaries of the Society of St. Pius X, as we were formed by our founder, Bishop Lefebvre, and do the exact work that he has done. We continue the work that he has done. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, no need to change. Do what he has done. That's what must be done. And so in any case, it's sufficient there. Anybody have any questions or whatever that we can... Yes.
One question, Father, I've been thinking about. I was listening to the 9, the 9 in...
Yes, in 83.
83, the story